And
yeah,
I'm excited about our topic today.
I am too. Astrologically, we're right in line with talking about communications and communicating when emotions are high, because that is what's been going on lately.
The choice out of fear might be this.
Not even a full moon.
And it's not necessarily the choice or the decision.
Mercury's in retrograde. Oh,
the program that I use to stream likes to bring up "Don't Let Fear Be in Control," or episode 13.
It always brings that one up, right?
Always brings that one up. It every time, and it'll bring it up on a different window. And the weird thing is, I don't know why it brings "Don't Let Fear Be in Control" up every time. That's the one that it brings up. Isn't that weird?
It is weird. And also very telling, because in every conversation we have, we end up talking about fear somewhere and control, and it must know something we don't know.
It's quite, yeah, especially because it's not our first episode or our most recent episode.
Yeah, it's right smack in the middle at this point.
Yeah. Eitan, we miss you as well. We were just talking about how we didn't do this last week because we were both traveling. And so really happy that we're doing this today. And yeah, it's funny because Eitan has said this before, that we pick topics like perfect timing sometimes for him. And
yeah,
this happened to me recently. So we picked this topic on Monday: communicating when emotions are high. And let me tell you, I had that moment then on Tuesday night, and it was very difficult and really fun and challenging. And I was laughing the whole time because I realized that we had just picked this on Monday, that we were going to do this. And it's just amazing how those things line up.
Yes, the synchronicity is always amazing to me too. And I'm not surprised anymore. And it appears as though as people continue to awaken and go down a path of healing or start to honor themselves more, that we are often in the same place as each other, meaning we feel the same things going on. It could be at a different layer, it could be a different level, it could be the start, could be the middle, could be the end for someone who knows. But I think there's a reason, when the collective comes together, there's a lot of power inside of that. So yeah, let's dig in on communicating when emotions are high.
Yes. So we talked about this a bit, and I said, I have the perfect song. And I'm not playing it because this requires a full band. It really does. So hopefully you guys had a chance to listen to Led Zeppelin's Communication Breakdown. This song, I love this song. And in the beginning of the song, you're going to hear this guitar riff, and it's kind of like chunking along. Then you start to hear a little bit of drums, and then the whole band is in. So you have the guitars first. The whole band comes in with vocals, and it's this screaming vocal that says, "Hey girl, stop what you're doing. Hey girl, you'll drive me to ruin." There are the way that the band comes in, and the hits that the band is doing. I mean, it is kind of chaotic. And this song is just, the whole song, like musically, is just describing the times when things are just a little chaotic and you have things you want to share, and emotions are just very high. This song, I couldn't think of a better song to highlight communicating when emotions are high, because this is what happens. It just becomes very chaotic in your head. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And oftentimes we get to the point of not listening because we're planning on the very next thing that we're going to say. Right. And it can be really tough to try and honor where the other person is at, and at the same time be able to calm our own selves down in those moments, because we get kidnapped, right? We get kidnapped by the stress response when communications are high and we want to make our point and we want to be heard and we want to say what comes next instead of remembering to calm ourselves in that moment. And it's tough unless you practice it.
Absolutely.
And we don't get a lot of chances to practice it when we're in the moment because, well, I wasn't raised that way. I never had a parent that said, okay, we're going to calm down now before we have another conversation. No, we were yelling and listening to the yelling and, so yeah, it's tricky when it's not the way that you've watched it happen forever.
Absolutely. And in the moment, there's no, like, if you're feeling like your emotions are high and you're trying to communicate, now is not the time to listen to this podcast. Cause this is only going to help you outside of those moments. You have to figure out outside of the moments that that's what happened. And then you want to change it. And once you decide you want to change, right? So this idea of stopping in the moment when emotions are really high, you'll feel this chaotic nature. And I did as well recently. And that's why this song is perfect because it's like, oh yeah, that's what my brain's doing. This song by Led Zeppelin, it is just screaming. It is just, and it's just chaotic and in your face and
Yeah.
lots of moving parts in the song and like a jerky nature. There's no calmness in it.
Right.
And that's what you feel when that happens. And there's nothing good that comes out of that. And until you have enough moments when, nothing good came out of my high emotions again and again and again. And then eventually maybe you'll come across this podcast and you're like, let me do the first step. So when it starts to feel really confusing and chaotic and starts to just bubble up, and I always think about it as like, it just kind of goes, just bubbling up, you have to stop and pause and breathe. And you taught me something, Joe, about, and I notice a difference breathing in and out through your nose.
Right. It engages the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we're in that state of chaos and we're feeling that stress boiling up inside of us, our sympathetic nervous system is ready to do its job, which is a reactive job. And it's just on alert and it's ready to go. Our adrenaline goes and like everything gets ready to do the thing. Whether that thing is to say the words that come out of your mouth when you don't really mean them to, or, throw a pot like I did one day and, dent your dishwasher or, whatever happens in those moments. Right. But when you stop, there's a point within which the sympathetic nervous system is like, wait a second, what are you doing? And then you breathe in and out through your nose, calmly through your nose, because that engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which gives you the chance to reclaim your mind, take it back a little bit, and actually respond instead of react.
I love that.
Yeah.
Very important to tell your brain, no, there is no saber-toothed tiger that is going to eat us or attack us, right? Because it doesn't know. Your brain is just trying to protect you.
Right.
It doesn't know. And so it's hard to even know that that's why you're responding that way, because consciously you're going through all these other things, right? But the actions could be the actions that can result in high emotions are really coming from this flight or fight or fawn. And what was the
freeze?
What? Freeze, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, which is a stress response.
Right.
That's what it is, and one of the easiest ways to know is when it just feels really chaotic, like this song, Communication Breakdown by Led Zeppelin. When it feels like that in your head, that's your signal to stop and breathe and have no interest in what the outcome's going to be. You're just trying to try to get back to the present moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And communicating is the most important thing in any relationship. So if the communication is not working for you, which means it's probably not working for the other person. It's really important to understand what you could be doing differently. And we can't control the other person. We can't get them to do something we want them to do, because everybody makes decisions based on their own selves. So we really have to focus on our own person, our own human experience, our own what we can control, which is in the moment emotions. We can't control the other person, so we work on our own selves. And that's really when when you're wanting better communication, it really starts with yourself.
Absolutely. It really
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing you can control. Right?
That's right.
So, okay. So high emotions, we start to breathe. We now can recognize we have high emotions, because you can't even recognize it when you're it's really hard to even like look at it from an observer standpoint.
No, not at all. You said something earlier, though, Kelsey, that's really important to remember. And that is that the body will tell you when your mind is starting to be kidnapped. And the mind and the body connection is so important to understand, that we all have specific signals that the body goes to, and they're subconscious. And they're learned when we're little. They're the things that our body does to protect us and to tell us that this is happening, so that the subconscious can take over. And those immediate reactions are and were great until they don't serve us anymore. And the moment that they don't serve us anymore is when we become more conscious to the way that we actually want to be communicating and living our lives. And so we listen to the body, and you said you can feel it boiling up.
Yeah.
To the point you can't stuff it down anymore. It's
No,
got to come up and out somehow.
it does. And how you typically respond to that doesn't have to be how you respond to it always. I
Right.
used to shut down when that would happen, or like it would feel like the pit of my stomach. I mean, it would just everything ggets warm, and you just feel like like your heart just dropped out of your just body,
Mhm.
and in moments like that, I used to just get really quiet and shut down, because I didn't understand how to I didn't I just the way I was raised and just taught, it didn't never worked when I tried to communicate or whatever. And so then I learned to shut down, and I don't do that anymore, but I can still utilize that signal that my body has, and then now change the action that I take upon that, which is breathing first, and then get to a place where I'm actually able to listen to what's really going on, and then start to validate the feelings that are coming in, right? And now all those
Right.
things are going to allow me to then say and speak my truth about the whatever's going on.
Right.
And
Calmly, right? Not defensively, but
no,
from a place of connectedness and calm.
yeah. And I think it's because I trust myself now that feeling in my body um, is simply just a signal, and it's emotions that need taken care of, right? They need taken
Right.
care of. And yeah. So this idea though of, if you do this and then you're communicating, like what happens if the other person like isn't able to connect with you, and you're trying, you've gotten to a place where you can connect, right? This is
Right.
something we both are like have some experience on this week.
Yes, absolutely. And it's there's a lot of things that happen when communication breaks down, and one of those things is that we start to make assumptions about the other person, what we think will happen, what maybe it's past experience that creates the assumption. And instead of being curious with the person in front of you, the assumptions will come in, and it just breaks all of the communication down. And we go, I constantly go back to the 4 agreements, because the 4 agreements, they really can be the foundational lifestyle that one lives within. And for me, that I go back to them every flippin' day.
When I have something that doesn't go very well, it's usually because I didn't follow one of the agreements. So
Right.
be impeccable with your word, right?
Right.
Make assumptions, don't take things personally, and always do your best. And
Right.
when one of those dropped for me, and being impeccable with my word also means to myself,
Oh, that's the first place that we all need to start when we're impeccable with our word, is to ourselves.
right?
You
And
know,
I
what are you saying in here?
what are you saying inside? What are you saying about, so like if something bad happens or whatever, or I have to kind of check in, because sometimes it's because I've been saying, things that haven't been that honest, and or whatever, like, or making assumptions or taking something personally. I'll tell you what, those four agreements always work.
Right.
Um, and in moments when someone else isn't able to communicate with you because maybe their emotions are high, not taking it personally, because it's usually not about you. It's whatever emotions are coming up for them. And it's on them to slow down and breathe and try to connect.
Mhm.
And it's not your responsibility, right?
Right. It's the hardest thing to, and now going back to, I always sound like a broken record when I talk about repetition being the mother of all learning, and practice makes the master. But the more we remind ourselves of specific things, the more it will anchor as a deep knowing. And then we don't have to remind ourselves anymore. We don't have to think about it because we just know it to be true. And one of those things is that nobody makes decisions based on anybody else but themselves. But a lot of people don't understand that because they're reacting to someone else's actions or words. And they think it's the other person that's caused them to react, when actually they're allowing themselves to react a certain way because it triggers them. It brings up a past experience, subconscious habit takes over, whatever it might be. But we are always allowing ourselves to be in the moment of reaction or response. And when communication breaks down, when emotions are flying high, all kinds of assumptions are made, right? All kinds of assumptions are made and all kinds of shit's taken personally. And these two things wrap around each other so tightly that until someone stops in the middle of it and says, wait a second, this is silly. Stop, breathe, let's regroup and really see it, what we're trying to do here, what's the heart of the conversation or lack thereof. It'll just continue to swirl around in this mess of infinity looping, right? It can be really, really, and truly it's what breaks communication. Taking it personally, making
Yeah,
assumptions.
absolutely. Absolutely. So this idea, this thing of swirling and it just going, I always come back to this when I do have moments when I can just kind of be at peace. And a friend of mine, we talk about this of like, when things feel very confusing, they are like like you need to stop. If it's really confusing, there's no point. There, you're hitting your head against the wall.
Yeah.
You have to stop.
Yep.
Because if it's causing your brain to do lots of mental gymnastics, there are things that probably are outside your control that you're trying to understand that aren't yours to understand, and just pause. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. You
Oh,
know,
scared little girl me living in, oh, tell me about it, sister.
I know what.
We have both of them.
Yes.
And it's something I always thought, okay, here's something that I've been doing. I did 2 weeks ago, and it actually was a really cool exercise, and I challenge anyone to do this, because as you do it, it will help in moments when you do have high emotions. um, and I'm realizing the after effects of it, and it is this idea that Mary just brought up, this little girl. And I always thought it was like really like kind of too woo woo for me. They always talk about,
I love my scientist friend all of a sudden thinking,
I know,
oh, we can combine science and spirituality and she can be woo woo too.
can be a little woo woo. So this idea of talking to your young self,
Your inner child.
your inner child. Now, for me, I think about I talk to my younger self. I It's a little too woo-woo to call it my inner child. I don't know why. So whatever works for you is fine. But technically it's my inner child. And I thought back of times when, things weren't that great. And I validated my feelings in those times. And I literally talked to myself, while and validated some of those feelings. And it was really interesting. What then happened is, we carry with ourselves all the experiences in our lives. And unless we take care of all of those, at some point in time, there's some experiences that we didn't have the skills to take care of. And it's worthwhile at some point to take care of them, because they will pop up. Maybe you're trying to communicate with someone and your emotions get really high. It could be from some things that you haven't healed from before. Right?
Absolutely.
So when you do have time, or you get the opportunity, when something kind of triggers you or whatever, to then try and dive a little deeper, knowing that maybe it's gonna take some emotional energy to do this. And I knowingly and willingly did this 2 weeks ago, and it was really life changing, Joe. I mean,
I know.
it really was. And I came to understand so much more, and trust myself a little more, and feel more like I have my own back. I validated some feelings from when I was younger that I had just kind of squirreled away because I didn't know how to deal with them then,
Right.
but now I do.
Right.
It's interesting that now, when I've had a very difficult conversation, I had a lot more. It was so much easier for me to breathe and just go, okay, yeah, this is disappointing. Let me talk. I can talk through this.
Right.
So it's amazing how that what Mary just said about the scared little girl, you know, taking time to go back, because you have skills now she didn't have, and it's worthwhile.
Yeah. I love how Mary Beth brought in too, that the little girl lived in her head, because when we're more in our heads, we're in our mind, our head, and we're not feeling everything in our body. And we overthink, and we're constricted, and there's not a lot of sensation when we're only in our head. But when we allow it to come through, and allow it to flow through, and allow our bodies to speak for us as well, then we have the ability to be more connected to ourselves. So
It's easier
yeah,
said. It's so
much easier said than done.
You've said this so many times to me, and I'm starting to get a lot better at it. And I've said it to other people too. I've said it to myself. And
Yeah.
just more recently, I think I just told you, it was the other day, and I said, every time something comes up where I'm disappointed, I just say to myself, yeah, that is disappointing.
Validate it. You have to validate the existing emotion, because if you box it up and shove it away, like you said, and like we've experienced, it will show back up. And in fact, that's really what trauma is. Trauma is not the actual experience. It's the emotion related to the experience that we never got to attend to. It's the emotion that's been boxed up and left unattended.
Oh.
So trauma.
And I'll add to that, because it might be that you didn't have the skills to attend to it.
Of
So
course
it's not lack of attention to it.
No.
It could, because I just thought when you said that, I was like, I don't want anyone to blame themselves for having trauma.
Never their fault.
It's not that you didn't attend to it, because I know I had things, and I wish I had, healed them earlier, but looking back, I just didn't have the skills, and
Nope.
I just,
And you weren't ready.
yeah.
You weren't ready. We, I personally, am a master compartmentalizer. That's a great word. I'm a master compartmentalizer. And, I got really, really good at it as a way to protect myself. And then I discovered that my stress response wasn't just compartmentalizing, but it was then fawning and trying to gain love and seek love from the outside, all things outside. And, it is a building on top of each other that we get to the point where we are in any given moment. But once something wants to be unboxed and seen, if you shove it back in, it's going to come back again and again until we have the chance to see it, love on it, give it gratitude, and learn from it so that you can use the learning and the new knowledge when you need it, like you've done. Right? Now, you said something else too that really is so fun. It brought me to a quote a friend of mine posted the other day on Facebook. And while I was in Ohio recently, I found a little notebook that had the quote on it. So I bought it for her. And it says, "Your mind will always believe everything you tell it.
Oh.
Feed it faith, feed it truth, and feed it love." And so when we talk about communicating out of love, when we have that love for our own selves, then we can communicate out of love. But the other way that we communicate is out of fear. And oftentimes when emotions are so high, we're completely afraid of the outcome. We're afraid of what the other person might think, expect, assume, or, say. I mean, there's fear ridden when our emotions are way up here.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
Yeah, always out of love.
100%. Let's talk about some ways that you can understand if you are have high emotions based out of fear. So what are some little things that could pop up that you could be, I really do need to pause because this is fear driven.
Right.
And when you communicate fear driven, you will end up not being impeccable with your word. I guarantee that, because you won't be in the present moment. And you won't be, you will be making assumptions, right? So,
That's
so
correct.
there's only bad things that can happen if your emotions are high and it's out of fear. So
out of fear. So yeah, Kelsey, you just kind of brought that right in perfectly, because staying in the present moment allows you to communicate out of love. Because when we're in fear, we're either thinking about something from the past that could happen again, right? Or we're future thinking and worried about the outcome when we really have no idea what that's going to be because we're not there yet, right? So that's what creates emotional angst.
it does.
When we're stuck on either end of the present.
Yep. So when our minds do the whole mental gymnastics, a lot of times they go into future thinking, where they're like, but this could happen, but this could happen, but this could happen. And then our emotions start to get high, and I guarantee you're going to suck at communicating.
Yeah. Yeah. Future thinking based on poor past experience.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how many times do you think of something in the future that is from a positive past experience? And,
right.
And if you do, you're not communicating out of fear. So why do we always most people always only think of future shit happening based on poor past experiences? What if we were to shift that and think, oh, I had a really great experience with that person and it's going to happen again in the future? How different would, we exist if we did that instead?
Right. But we don't do that because I swear, well, I think it's because our brains are meant to help us survive. And
Correct.
So its job is to really focus on things you're afraid of.
Kidnapped. Old.
Yeah. I mean, because let's say a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you. I don't care how beautiful the flowers are right beside your feet. It wouldn't be a good idea to smell the flowers while the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you. So our brains are really doing this to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Because we don't have saber-toothed tigers, as soon as you're not in a dangerous situation, you have to consciously choose.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And you know what? As I continue to evolve my learning and understanding around emotional agility and the ability to really, manage our emotions in any given moment, it becomes more clear that what's been handed to us through the generations and through our DNA and through our experiences, it's not our fault that we go where we go reactively and subconsciously. It's just not. But if you want to live a different way, it's our responsibility to do something different with it, to learn a new way. So ancestrally and through the generations, we're handed all kinds of things. But when you get to the point where it doesn't serve you anymore, when it gets in the way of good communications and your own truth and feeling that connectedness and love and calm and peace, it's time to make a change. And it's okay to not do the things that your ancestors did. Heck, why? We're not here to live their lives. We're here to live our own lives. Yeah.
I love this. The idea of communicating effectively. One thing, going back to kind of that, is you were kind of bringing up this topic of what happens to ourselves and what we think of ourselves when we don't communicate well. Because it ends up causing more issues. And I was listening to, it was on a Super Soul Sunday with Oprah.
Mhm.
And I forget who her guest was that said this, but it was talking about living your truth. But this idea, she brought up how you know if you're living your truth. It's when you don't betray yourself. And I think that times when, when your emotions are high for whatever reason, usually when you respond, and you get, actually, most of those conversations, when you leave, you don't feel good. And you might have said things that you may be betraying yourself, right? Not fully true, not fully connected. And that idea of, I'm most scared of betraying myself, right? I don't want to do that now. And so I'd rather, I'd rather take the time to pause and try my best
Right.
respond than potentially betray myself and feel worse afterwards.
Right. It's as you talk about that, it's when you look back to the past and maybe when not when you realized that the way communication was happening wasn't serving you anymore, but the moment that you realized when your own way of communicating was taken away from you. And those are the moments, not in the heat of any moment, but those are the things that we can look back to and say, oh, no wonder this doesn't serve me anymore, because I was told to sit down and shut up, or I was told I talk too much, or I was told I was too emotional, or to stop crying, or, just Aducci, be quiet. Silence is golden. I was told that by a priest in 5th grade, and he was sort of joking, but I know he wasn't, so you look at those things, and it's the little death by 1,000 cuts. It's the chink in the armor of who you were as a child that was coming out and shining your light. And all of a sudden, whack, no more, whack. Nope. Can't be like that. And you start to forget who you are. And the point within which you remember who you are and reclaim that is when you can be more conscious with the way you communicate, when you can love you and communicate out of that love without worry, without fear, without anxiety of outcome or expectations. Yeah. And honoring yourself.
Yes.
And it's hard. It's so hard. It takes practice.
It takes lots of practice. So I thought maybe, what if we leave today with a couple, think of a couple of things that we can leave someone with in the back pocket when emotions get high, when you're trying to communicate and it's not working. And the first one we said was breathing in and out through your nose.
Correct.
But even before that, you just have to understand that when things start getting chaotic and confusing, and just listen to this song by Led Zeppelin, Communication Breakdown. Your head, then
I can't. I listened and I was like, oh, my sympathetic nervous system was like, no. I'll get through once.
Yeah, you're like, Kelsey, why did you choose? This is exactly
Perfect title,
what
perfect song.
the perfect combination of lyrics and the instrumentation. Perfect, chaotic. When it feels like that, that's really the first step, is at least to recognize, oh yeah, I had that conversation and I had a lot of emotions.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing would be to not just the stopping and the breathing, because it can be really tough to do that in the moment. That takes practice. And the other person might be like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you saying something? When you start to change the way you do things, the people that you're closest to may be confused. And that's when you have to communicate, hey, this doesn't serve me anymore. I don't like this anymore. This doesn't feel right. I'd rather have a nice, calm conversation. So instead of me throwing a pot at the dishwasher and hoping you react to that, I'm going to stop in the moment, But the other thing would be to really be curious with yourself and ask yourself if you're making assumptions about what you think the other person is thinking, or, are they making assumptions about you? And start to ask the questions.
Absolutely. This is a great thing to do after you've had an emotional conversation, like when emotions are high, like, was I making assumptions?
Mhm.
I'd say too that one thing that I have used before when I couldn't do it like in the moment, is if I need to like weirdly breathe and just, because when you start to do that, it takes longer and it starts taking less and less time. I can do it
Right.
pretty quickly now. And I remember when there was a time I couldn't have any disagreement without crying. I couldn't even talk to someone that was like a superior of mine, and have an issue without crying. That's just how I was. I don't know. It was really hard. So that's why I usually didn't say anything.
That's because your body was telling you that it was, you had a lot of shit boxed up and it was finally coming out,
And so what I did as I started to move through that was I had this key thing that I would do, and I would validate my own feelings at the same time as communicating to the other person and giving myself space with a statement that was kind of like this. It was, this conversation is making me very emotional, and I want to have this conversation with you, but can we have it at a different time? And then normally the other person will be like, yes. And then you leave the office, you leave wherever it is, and you do the things you need to recollect, collect yourself. And
Yep.
then you come back and you say, hey, is now a good time? And normally if someone gets that, even if their emotions are really high, most people are going to respond in a good way of like, oh yeah, sure,
Yep.
time. So
Absolutely.
practice. If you are someone who has a hard time with some of this, that was something I had to practice in the mirror. And so I always had in my back pocket just in case things got out of hand for me. So that was something that was really useful. A therapist of mine told me that. And it was really, and it validated me getting emotional. I told them out loud, hey, I'm getting a little emotional here and I need a little bit of time or a break from this.
It's a beautiful way to stop.
Yep.
It's a beautiful way to stop. And saying it out loud gives you
out loud validate your feelings, like you're not judging them, but you have to practice it when you're not high emotions in the mirror, like practice it looking at yourself,
Yeah.
And then you have it in your back pocket. And so all of these things though are, so breathing, having something like that in your back pocket, also using it sometimes when you recognize the other person isn't able to even communicate with you.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you're just going to regret the conversation if you're coming at it from really high emotions. Nothing good's going to come out of that.
No, it's not. And the reminder that you aren't responsible for anybody but your own self in those moments is really, really important. And that's why, you know, the ability to stop and use your words, right? Be impeccable with your word, which is what you're doing by saying, hey, you know, this isn't working for me right now. Can we do this another time? You know, that's huge. It's very, very great way to honor what you need. Because in that moment, it doesn't really matter what the other person needs if you're not able to respond the way that will serve you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to listen to them anyway.
Nope.
That's not nice to them.
Nope. No, not at all. Not at all. This is an ongoing, like most things, when you're working on being your best self, it's an ongoing practice to honor what you need and doing all of it out of love. And when you communicate, when you understand emotions are going to get excited, it's okay to take the pause.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I challenge everyone here, make sure you listen to that song by Led Zeppelin. If your brain ever feels like this, you need to pause, you need to breathe, and you might need to tell the other person that, hey, I need a moment. My emotions are running kind of high, you know. And doing that, even those things will eventually turn into something where you can catch it faster. You can talk to yourself, validate your feelings, and get to a point where you can listen and respond out of love.
That's right. And what a great way to inspire someone else to honor themselves when they're in that same place. You know, it's always be the change you want to see in the world. Well, that world is just right in here, right? So you can inspire someone else to understand themselves better by inviting them into that conversation.
Absolutely. Or sit down and listen to the song together and look to them and say, is this what your brain is doing? Because my brain's doing this. Great conversation starter.
Yes. Yeah. I love it.
Well, thank you for the conversation. Thank you everyone who joined in. This is great.
It is. It's really good. I've missed you. I said to you earlier, it's like it's been 6 months since we've done something, even though it's only been a week, 2 weeks.
Oh,
So, yeah, thanks for being here, you guys.
thank you for being here, everyone. All right, folks, we will see you next Friday.
Yes.
You know, if you have a topic that you really want to talk about, we do come up with them. And then for some reason, something in our lives happens where we
need it too.
need it too.
That's right. Oh, it's so good. Well, love and light, everybody.